Hello and welcome to the LA Venture Podcast. We're David Waxman and Minnie Ingersoll, partners and investors at TenOneTen. We've watched Los Angeles grow from a sleepy tech backwater to a bustling mecca of startup opportunity. Through conversations with fellow investors and a few other special guests, we'll deliver an insider's view of the LA tech scene.
On this episode, serial entrepreneur Eytan Elbaz amuses us with his random stories of bacon-wrapped suitcases full of money, how he managed to pick 6 unicorns as an angel investor, and the LA tech scene that he's been a part of for decades.
I'm so excited to be here. I just heard that we have exactly 0 followers, and what can you do with that? You can tell so many stories.
Well, welcome Eytan Elbaz, always a critic. Our guest today, thank you so much for coming. Eytan, you're a venture partner at TenOneTen.
I am.
You're a multiple-time founder.
Yes.
You're a very successful angel investor.
That's kind.
Welcome to the LA Venture Podcast.
Thank you for having me in this room for the 3 of us to listen to this podcast.
Well, there might be a few others because we're getting famous fast.
We are going to have a few followers soon.
Yes. He always digs straight for the number.
Yeah, great.
I love statistics. I love metrics. That's how you know whether to invest, right?
You got your start at Applied Semantics. Tell us a little bit more about that experience.
So Applied Semantics was actually my second job. Gosh, it was actually my 3rd job after college. It was at the ripe old age of 25 when we started Applied Semantics. So I'd already been out in the world for a bit. And Gil and what became his co-founder, Adam, had been tossing around internet ideas probably for about 6 months before we came up with the idea of, hey, this thing's good enough to spend all of our time working on.
And so you're part of the founding team.
Yeah, I was part of the founding team of Applied Semantics.
And Gil is Gil Elbaz,
Gil,
partner at TenOneTen, your
Gil,
brother.
my brother, CEO and founder of Applied Semantics and Factual, legendary stock picker, but you wouldn't know it by talking to him. He doesn't brag much.
He doesn't brag much. He's also a general partner at TenOneTen.
Yeah.
He was running Google LA when I was at LA. I mean, I know you guys from 2003 when I was at Google and we acquired Applied Semantics, which I know was a great outcome and exit for you guys.
Yeah. I would like to think it was a great outcome and an exit for Google as well.
Good point. No, it was great all around, obviously, and now we're here together, so that was great too.
And for the record, what did Applied Semantics do, and why was it a great acquisition by Google?
The interesting thing, Applied Semantics had 8 separate products, but the product we were most known for is called AdSense, and AdSense would read a web page, find out what that web page was about, and would look for contextually related advertisements that would match that web page to try and increase the click-through rates. And it increased click-through rates a little bit, enough to make a big difference. And so Google bought that company for $102 million.
In Google stock.
Right.
Mostly in Google stock.
In 2002.
2003.
2003.
So, a little later.
So, but it was pre-IPO.
Pre-IPO.
And I've been told it was, at that point, over 1% of the company.
That's right.
So, pretty good exit.
Pretty good exit.
Congratulations on that success. And you've had a bunch since. So, you do an interesting mix of things. You work with us as a venture partner. You still do angel investments on your own, and you're an operator of several different things. Tell us a little bit more about what you do in the day in the life of Eytan.
Yeah, so I like to take very active roles in startup companies. So I really like to get involved from day one. Maybe it's a founder and idea. Maybe it's a founder and 2 employees and idea. But really small, and I like to focus on figuring out the right founder and innovating on product, and then getting the initial seed funding together and getting the management team together. Those are the 3 things I really like to focus on.
So this is someone who you knew before, or there's someone who's coming to you, and I mean, it sort of sounds studio model-ish in a way nowadays. Is that
an incubator of one?
Yeah, it's an incubator of one. I never thought about it this way. You meet people all sorts of different ways. I like to be a guy who's out there. I like to go to networking events and generally talk to people and see what they have to say.
Now you're kind of known.
Yeah, and now a lot of deals come to me, so I'll often just get emails inbound, probably 2 or 3 deals a week that just show up on my desk, and sometimes they're interesting, and if they are, then I'll dig, and usually I'll dig a lot, and if it doesn't get kicked out, then it was interesting enough to keep working on.
Yeah, no, I sometimes think, okay, this deal could be interesting, except it's missing something. And maybe you're like, and what it's missing is me.
That's funny. I don't usually think about it that way. One of the interesting things, I guess, people always, I found that I really like to be kind of the number 2 guy at a company or the number 3 guy at a company. Number 1 has got this insane number of pressures, constant decisions, and it's really a high stress job. Of course, you reap the rewards as number 1. You probably have 5 times the equity of number 2. But sometimes you can be number 2 at multiple companies, and if these companies are somehow tangentially related and yet not a conflict, you can figure out how to build a mini little keiretsu with your companies and figure out how they can help each other. And I feel like I've done that a bunch in my career as well.
So like, I know Social Native, Scopely. So like, those both sort of follow this model where you became some number 2 or some is part of your incubator of one sort of thing. Like, have you done this? You've done this a few times then.
Done this a few times now. Scopely, I'd known Walter for a couple of years. We were friends, and we'd been, I think I'd been coming to the networking events and inviting Walter along because I thought he was an interesting guy, and seemed like he was getting somewhere in his career. And he'd put forth the idea for Scopely at the end of 2010. And by this point, I was kind of sold that I thought Walter would be a successful guy. And at this point, I think he'd been talking to one other co-founder at that point, Ankur Balsara. And so, he pitched me the idea for Scopely, which is nothing really like what Scopely does today. It looked a bit more like a social friend dating meeting app, kind of more like a Facebook version of Tinder that we worked on for about a year before we got to mobile games. But that's the idea we worked on. And so it was the 3 of us for a bit who co-founded that company, and eventually added Eric Fuderon, a 4th co-founder.
Got it.
Yeah, can you tell us about what was it, $10,000 wrapped in bacon?
Yeah.
A spear?
Yeah, this was a crazy idea out of Walter's head that kind of innovated. There was an idea out there, like, how do we go and recruit engineers? We had to do we had to come up with some sort of gimmick. And what would that gimmick be? And the idea that Walter came up with was called the most interesting engineer in the world. We registered the domain name the-most-interesting and if you Google this, I think you can still find some pictures of me online, literally holding a metal briefcase full of $11,000 of cash.
That was 11.
Physically wrapped in bacon. And we also promised you all these other crazy things, like a custom-made tuxedo, a custom oil painting of yourself, and a crossbow, a box of cigars, I think a lifetime supply of some beer, that kind of thing.
Did it work?
It did. We found like 4 engineers with this thing, and one of them got featured on TechCrunch with all of his prizes and awards.
Oh, so there really is somebody walking around with a crossbow in a custom-made tuxedo carrying a bunch of money.
Mike Thomas, an interesting redhead character who migrated to New York and was sort of destined to become the most interesting engineer in the world.
Wow.
Really get back in.
That. Wow. I was going to ask about your angel investing, but I just had to pause on the bacon wrap suit.
Well, are there any other sort of foundings that you want to talk about?
Let's see. Social Native was an interesting one. So Social Native got pitched to me by a mutual friend. Hello, Eli Perlman. And Eli said, hey, there's this guy who's working on this influencer marketing company. You should go and talk to him. And then I was, I'd already been pitched on 50 influencer marketing companies. And I was like, very quick email, like, not interested. Thanks. Week later, Eli writes another email. Hey, you should talk to this guy, David, Social Native. They're doing this pretty neat stuff. And I wrote back, yeah, I heard you the first time. Not interested. A week later, Eli writes back a third time. He's like, just meet the guy. Don't forget the business. And I was like, all right, third time, I'm going to go and meet the guy. And I met David Shadpour. And David came to the Factual office, Avenue of the Stars, and he showed me his idea, and he was a very excitable guy. He was like very passionate about what he was doing. And I basically was entertained by this meeting and thought he was, I was like, you know what? I think you're a great entrepreneur. I think you're on, sounds cool, not interested in your business. Good luck to you. And went about on my way. And I don't think I would have ever thought about it again. He ended up emailing me again and saying, hey, can we talk about the business? And I was like, you've got multiple problems with your business. First of all, you don't tell anyone that your Instagram ads are ads. And I think that might even be illegal. And also, as soon as you start telling people they're ads, nobody's going to engage with your content because people don't want to be tricked into clicking on ads. And I think I gave him one other reason why this was a big no for me. And I left it at that and thought I wouldn't talk to this guy again. Because usually when you tell someone no with a really strong email of like, no, and here are the reasons why, and I'm done, most people just don't have the stamina or the mental capacity to hear no again. But David came back to me. He's like, I fixed everything already. I remember the third thing I told him is your business is just too small. It'll never be a big business. And a week later, he's like, I fixed everything. I was like, you couldn't have fixed everything. He's like, no, I've been hashtagging ad on all the things. So I fixed that. And I've noticed that the engagement rate remained completely unchanged. So I've already fixed your first two problems. And the only thing I have to do is convince you that there's going to be a big business. And I was like, all right, let's have another meeting. I ended up having two more meetings. David claims to this day, when he asked me later on how many times I said no to him, I thought the answer was 4. He said, no, it was 6. You told me you didn't want to invest in me 6 separate times. But I finally got past all those no's and got comfortable writing the first check into Social Native. And, once I get comfortable writing a check, I'm the kind of guy who will tell all my friends, like, this is it. Let's do this deal. And, we quickly brought in a bunch of checks into the company.
Including TenOneTen. And it was one of your first moves as venture partner. And it's a very successful company in our portfolio. So thanks.
Yeah.
But don't you worry that all of the founders that Eytan has said no to are going to listen to this because they're going to be listening to our podcast and they're all going to come back 5 more times.
Don't worry. We only have an audience of 2 or 3, according to Eytan.
That's right. And how many of them can take no 6 times?
Yeah. Well, I found that actually when hiring engineers or operations people, like normal people, when I say no, they then don't pursue when they're, trying to get hired. But my sales team all did the same thing. They believe in like a 10-point drip campaign works.
Yes.
And they've seen it and they believe that no is just an opening because you actually replied.
I mean, I think of myself as a guy who will get, who'll take a couple no's, but wow, I mean, some tenacity and grit to really keep taking it in because I think it takes an emotional toll for a person to keep hearing that no. It has to, right? It can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But isn't that fundraising generally? Like I know, we went through a lot of fundraising rounds at Shift. One of our rounds was particularly difficult and we got 50 no's and then someone wrote us a huge check,
Yeah.
But typically those are 50 no's from 50 different people or
but it
maybe 25.
Actually, maybe it wasn't 50 no's, maybe it was 20 no's, but it isn't actually better to hear no from 20 different extremely smart, well-respected investors who think your company is not something they want to invest in. At least it was just like, actually 20 no's from one person might have been easier.
Yeah, right.
Fair enough.
Maybe it'll feel less bad. Although that one person will think you're totally nutball crazy.
Right. I am super interested, though, in just your process. If I could ask, just your process today. So you're also an angel investor. You don't always jump in as and now I'm going to sort of become your right-hand man number 2 or something. So I am interested in just your process of like how many deals. I think you said someone will send you deals like 2 or 3 times a week. But like, how do do you actually decide who to take a meeting with based on, people say there's a lot of gut to it, but what does that mean for you?
God, there's a bunch of things that go into it, and God, timing's a really interesting. Like when you receive that email, who is like, were you busy that day or were you not busy that day? A good friend of mine mentions that he had a very, very, very early conversation with Evan at Snapchat, and like around the seed, and literally his child was crying in the back seat, and he was like, "Oh, I'll call you back," and if maybe your child crying kept you out of Snapchat. Like, I think timing is really important. But you glance at this email. Do they have something interesting there? Are there some cool metrics that they showed you? I love numbers. Does the person have a little bit of a background that shows like he might be someone who's going to succeed? Did it come from somebody who you trust? Is it enough to take this to a phone call or to a meeting? And, vast majority of them, you might not even respond to. Maybe you'll respond a little bit and see if they bit and they've got a good answer to a question or two, and you'll go and meet them.
How much do you feel like you have to be to some degree an expert or at least familiar with the space? Because I feel like sometimes I get a pitch, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to work all weekend just to understand what this is about or something.
Yeah, I guess we've come over time, and it's something I have to continually remind myself, even though I've learned it so many times. Don't fall in love with the product, fall in love with the founder.
Right.
Don't fall in love with the product. Is that going to be boring if I repeat that? I should.
No, it's repeated again for me.
Don't fall in love with the product, fall in love with the founder, because the product is going to change and the founder isn't.
Yeah, but still, like the three of us all sit in meetings together where we talk about
the product.
Ideas.
The product.
I know, and because the product is important too. They're both important. Here's the thing. A good founder probably found his way to a good product. So talking about the product is also in a way talking about the founder, because you're talking about that founder's idea. And if you don't know the founder that well in the beginning, the one thing you know is that this founder is saying, I'm dedicating my life to this thing for the next 3 years. So that product is an embodiment of that founder. And that's why we examine the product.
Yeah. And something I always say is that I don't need to be so expert that I understand as much as the founder knows.
Yeah.
I just need to understand enough to know that the founder knows what the founder's talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
So you don't always wait for stuff to come to you. Notably, Oculus, I think you went after, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I have a group of friends who would go and watch football every Sunday, and football. I didn't usually use my Sunday afternoons to go and watch football. It's just not my thing. But once a year, I would be like, I'm going to do it this time. And it was Barney's Beanery in West Hollywood, and that's where the game was. And probably 8 minutes after getting there, everyone was really into the game and just doing that. And I remember thinking, I'm already bored. And I just literally sidled up next to the person next to me. We just started chatting. And that person was Brendan Iribe. And we're explaining to each other like what we do and what do you do? What do you do? And like, I was like, yeah, I do games. Like, I kind of do games. I was like, and he's explaining to me what his thing is. And I was basically like, so it's like a 3D game thing. I had no idea what he was talking about. You can't explain the Oculus to someone who's never seen it because it doesn't make any sense. He said he's working on a 3D game thing. I said I'm working on a game company, and it was a really good chat. And we probably hung out for like 45 minutes. Didn't think about him again. 2 months later, I'm at a hackathon that I was a judge at, and someone's putting this thing on their head, and there's a big line of people, but the kid kind of recognized me and goes, Eytan, you want to try it? And I was like, yeah, I want to try whatever that thing is. And I put it on, and the moment I put that device on is a moment I will never forget because it was so crazy to me what was happening.
What world were you in, or what?
It was the Southern Italy one. It was the first Oculus DK1. You're in Italy and you're looking around and you're outside in the castle and it's sunny outside.
And you feel like you're there.
Yeah, you're there. And I was just so taken aback by this thing. And
so you love the product.
Love the product. But let's dig into why I wrote the check. Got to LinkedIn as soon as I got to LinkedIn, found this guy, Brendan, the founder and CEO of Oculus, and sent him a message like, hey, do you remember we met 2 months ago in a bar? I just tried Oculus. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen. He responded pretty quickly. He was like, yeah, of course. What's going on? And we ended up making a deal. And I was like, I'll angel invest in your company if you angel invest in mine.
It's funny.
And it was kind of, we had a gentleman's bet of like, who's going to win the bet of like, who can make who more money. And so I guess he ended up winning the bet.
Wait, what was your company?
Scopely.
Okay.
But for now.
Right. So you know what? The truth is there's a chance depending on when or if you sold your Facebook stock, maybe.
Okay, just talk about at the transaction.
Yeah. So anyway, we decided to exchange checks into each other's companies. And he did give me a little bit of background on Oculus at that point. And one of the most insane things was at that point, they'd already pre-sold $10 million worth of Oculus sets. I didn't even feel like it was a seed bet anymore. It was like, this is a Series A company who's selling hardware, which is the hardest thing in the world to do. They've already built it. They're already selling it. And so it didn't even feel like a high risk seed bet at that point.
I know you're interested in AR VR.
Yeah.
But I heard you say one thing which I really liked, and you and I have never talked about, but you said something like, most people will remember the first time they put on a VR headset or stepped into virtual reality,
Yes.
right? And
Well, for me,
no, I so clearly remember the first time, like I was the front row seats of a boxing match, and it was one of those where like you saw the punch like hit the guy's face and you heard it, right? You
Yes.
heard the surround sound and you heard the whole crowds, going wild.
was it a live or an animated?
Live, like,
Right.
oh yeah, no, it was,
People.
you were right there,
Yes.
front row seats, and it was a real match, and I was like, I would never watch sports, like, can I watch
Yeah.
every sporting event in front row seats?
I can't wait to watch NBA games like this.
Absolutely.
It's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second, because Oculus ended up being a great bet for you as an angel investor.
Yeah.
But the Oculus trajectory didn't go as most people planned.
I still think that it's going to happen. I still think the same way you see a million kids holding their cell phones and they cannot put them down, we'll get there. We'll get there with VR.
A million kids with a ski mask on their head?
Yeah, I mean, they won't
scuba
necessarily
mask?
be doing it out. You won't necessarily be doing it in all the same places, but as far as the time you spend, there are going to be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who spend multiple hours a day in VR just a few years from now. Every day.
What do you think needs to happen?
I mean, all kinds of
For
things.
that to come
So the device has to be cheap. It has to make you not get sick or feel nauseous. It has to have a lot of great content for it. It has to provide you with social hooks that don't make you feel totally alone in there. Like, make sure that you feel like you're in there with people, because one of the reasons we hang out on Facebook and Instagram, we feel like we're surrounded by people. And so there's very few apps that really do that today. There are a couple attempts, but it's all too early. So all these things need to come together in a hit, and they eventually will.
What about things that are different, just like what we were just talking about, which is anytime I want to decide whether I want to travel to Italy or I saw one that was the streets of China at one point, and I felt like I was on a really busy street in some, I forget, Chinese city, which I'd never been to. So like there's different interesting applications. Just, I want to see every, I want to be front row seats to every sporting match I watch.
I have this one sort of effed up one I think about sometimes, and that is...
Don't say porn.
No, I mean, that one's the obvious one. I think there are experiences right now where people in general lack tolerance, understanding of other people, and develop hate and so forth because they can never put themselves into other people's shoes. This is going to be a great opportunity for people to put themselves into each other's shoes. What would it feel like to be incarcerated? What would it feel like to be in jail or in prison or in solitary confinement? And maybe put someone in there for a little while, maybe a potential offender, and put them in there for a while and see what it feels like. And or maybe you're homeless. What does it feel like to be homeless? What if you had to spend all night on a street? Or obviously you don't feel the danger there, but you're going to feel some of it. Hungry or poor, or like, how do you go and try to sort of drive empathy into people who have problems feeling it because they just can't wear those shoes? And I think there's like a lot of good you can do psychologically and for mankind to just do some of that stuff.
One thing about that idea is an idea of empathy, and that seems to be something that runs through pretty much everything you do. And you just wrote a really interesting blog piece about being empathetic as an investor. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I think that in general, investors are sort of, your job is to buy low and sell high. That's literally what your job is to do. And to do that, oftentimes you have to make decisions that are, might be callous to a founder or, to an employee or something like that. And, I don't totally subscribe to it's the most important thing in the world to absolutely maximize every dollar in the face of ensuring that the human feels good at the end of the day. Like there's a value to people feeling good, and we don't really quantify that in a pro forma P&L statement at the end of a quarter, but it's there. And so for me, I think back to my experiences at Applied Semantics where there were a couple times that investors did things that were really, really painful to us and almost like for no reason. They probably had a reason. They probably thought this was a path to make money, but that they didn't take into account that on the other end were a few people who spent all of their waking hours trying everything they could do to build a company and being treated poorly or talked to harshly or been given in unfavorable terms when their company wasn't doing well wasn't the solution to our problems. We needed, call it not a parent. We had, you have someone to say, don't worry, it's going to be okay. That's not what we needed. We needed a mature business person to say, hey, we're going to help you solve your way through your business problems. And that's not what we got from our investors. And that'll stick with me forever. And so when I got to be on the other side of the table and be an investor, I knew I wanted to lead with empathy more than anything else. And so I often tell founders that you're inevitably going to get to a place where it's going to be your worst day, where you want to quit, or you think the company's already dead, or you want to cry, or you want to punch someone, or you want to punch yourself. And call me on that day. Call me that day, and I'll do my best to try to help you through the problem. And if I can't help you through the problem, I'll just be there to give you a hug.
You've invested in a number of unicorns.
37. Oh, no. Unicorns.
37. But cha-ching.
37 angel investments. And I think we're at 5 unicorns.
Dude.
I think.
Wow. That's is that a herd of unicorns?
I was going to say a quiver.
Right.
A quiver's okay.
A quiver? Yeah. A quiver.
So can you name them?
Scopely, Oculus, FabFitFun,
Climate Corp?
Climate Corporation, thank you, and Bird.
That's incredible. And you've done 37 investments. So my question a bit was going to be like, looking at the really successful ones, let's start there. When you met the founders, were you like, I know this is a success? I mean, obviously, or have you thought that in 37 instances?
No. I definitely, you don't know the winners. And I guess I've heard anecdotally that Chris Sacca didn't know that Uber was going to be any bit of a winner. David Friedberg, remember David?
Yep. Knew him at Google.
All I knew about David was we always had good conversations. He was a smart guy. And I knew that he was leaving on the table 2 years worth of stock options to do this thing. He explained the thing and it sounded interesting, but I didn't know unicorn or not. But I think that was the reason I wrote this check. David's like, I'm leaving. I even asked him, I was like, wait, I'm just taking a rough guess. You don't have to tell me how many stock options you're leaving on the table. So I was like, I think you're leaving this many 7 figures on the table. And he kind of shrugged like, probably. And I was like, to do this thing. I was like, all right, then I'm in. That was it for me. And I had no idea it would be a unicorn. And I think the way that business actually worked, I think a lot of his success was towards the final, the back 25% of that company. I mean, they went through a couple little things that didn't exactly work at first. So, but he was a great fundraiser and he kept going and finally nailed it.
And so do you think, right, so there are times there where you're like, okay, maybe this isn't going to be a success. Maybe it is.
Also, the FabFitFun guys. I knew the Brookine brothers for a while. Such sweet guys. And, I'd known them and probably Danny a bit better for a few years. And he'd been kind of toiling on this idea. It was basically a newsletter, basically an ad-supported newsletter, which is not an interesting business at all. And Mikey had been working at Beachmint. He's like, hey, Beachmint's going to, meet this newsletter, and we're going to turn the newsletter into a subscription product. And by this point, I'd already heard Beachmint had already pretty much failed. And I was like, kind of, maybe. And here's my story of why I invested in Danny Brukim. It was not the box idea. I'd already seen him work on the newsletter for a while. We were playing basketball one night, and his car was locked inside a parking lot. And the only way for him to get out of this parking lot was to drive over a curb. And the curb was like a halfway curb. And Danny had a decent, nice car. He's like, I'm not driving over that curb. I was like, well, there's no other way out of here. He goes, there's a way out of here. I was like, and we walked all over the place, and he's yelling like, I need to get out of this parking lot. I got to get out of this parking lot. And finally a maintenance guy goes, he's like, dude, there's nobody here. This car's locked. If you want to get your car tomorrow, you can do that. Or you can drive over that curb. Those are your two options. Daniel looked at him for a second. It was just, parking lot. I'm trying to get out of this parking lot. I'm trying to just look at this guy. I'm not accepting either of your options. I've already processed that. I'm already like, Daniel, let's just drive over the curb, man. He's like, no. And he yelled and screamed until some other guy showed up and was like, what? Fine. I can open this lock. Yes, I have a key. And it turns out there was a key to open up this lock to get Danny's car out of this parking lot. Good. And I was like, this guy's got grit. He's not going to take no for an answer.
God, I wish you had told me that story back when I passed on the company, because I was looking at the product instead of the people.
You know what? It's still, you remember these stories in retrospect. That was the story, but you also do. If it failed, I'm sure I'd pick out some story about Danny Brukim that some other story. But that's the story that stuck with me, and that's what got me in. Not the box.
Because I looked at that company and I saw a box in a space full of boxes, and
there's 100 box companies. Yeah. Most of them
top 10 box list for that vertical.
Nobody else won. Nobody else won a box company.
Do you think you've changed over the course of your 37 investments? Like, do you think you've changed what you look for?
It's interesting. I actually just looked through the list, and I kind of went through I think I got better over time. I think I had less losers. I had more losers up front. I got just swept away with cool, fun ideas early up on. A cool, fun idea, I'd just be like, I'm in. I was pretty, this is the product now kind of thing. Like, this product's not going to change, and paid less attention to the founder. And I think my earlier bets were less good.
I think we were talking about, 5 unicorns out of 37. That's pretty incredible. And if you were a fund, that would be you'd have incredible returns. And I think you said something kind of self-deprecating, like it's actually a little easier as an angel.
I think it is. I really think it is. Angels have a couple of...
you don't have dead weight like us
hanging
around your shoulder?
So how many VCs can get into a Series A? Like 1, maybe 2. Right. How many angels can get into a Series A? Like 10 or 15. So you have like 10 or 15 shots to get one small check-in versus 1 or 2 shots to get a big check-in. There's just more spots for an angel. Number 2, if you want to be the fund, you have to have a conviction to get a term sheet out there first. Like, I want to be the guy. Here's my term sheet. I believe in you. Angel, oftentimes you can hang around the hoop. You can be like, hey, I think this is cool. I think this is cool. They're like, oh, we got a term sheet. Like, cool. How's that going? How's that term sheet going? You've got like a month.
Yeah.
To like, oh, how are the metrics? How's it going? Yeah. Are you in? You still have the term sheet? How are the metrics? Okay, I'm in.
I like it.
It's like, oh, that term sheet fell. Yeah, okay. So you get to play that game a little more, and you don't intend to play the game like that's not the goal, but it just happens because they'll be like, oh, the docs aren't ready yet. Just hang tight. And during hang tight, you might as well ask, how are you guys doing? And that can give you, a little extra visibility as to, is it going well or is it not going well? And sometimes that month you might change your mind one way or the other.
Can we go into the random personal questions?
Sure.
This is a section of our question sheet.
Let's do some random personal questions.
Boxer briefs?
Yeah. If you'd care to answer that. No, I was going to ask about advice that you give or don't agree with. Can I ask about advice giving?
Okay.
There's kind of 3 dimensions of this. Advice that you find yourself giving a lot, How about I'll start there? Or advice that you hear people giving, like that VCs are always giving that you don't agree with, or advice that you give yourself? It's a multi-part question.
There's two things I always tell to like people who are trying to build their career, and that is, I'm not a fan of the MBA, and if you're going to get one, you better have a really, really good reason. Explain to me why you're getting this MBA. If you cannot come up with a really good reason, don't get that degree. That's one.
Yeah, I have my MBA. That's just
I do think the world was different. 20 years ago.
Well, in 2000, I went right. So
19 years ago.
So I IPO'd. My first company IPO'd in March of 2000, and then we were going to have layoffs. And I went to business school in 2000, right after our IPO, because it was
Great time to go to business
It was
school.
a good time. It was fun.
I know a lot of people who took that hiatus or 2008 to go to business school.
It was B2B. It was back to banking or back to business school.
Yeah, I've actually thought about that one because I wrote that question down in an article I did called 7 Lessons I Learned from Applied Semantics 10 Years After the Acquisitions. And this, the number 7 thing I learned and what I would tell myself is forgive yourself. You're doing the best that you know how, and things will get better and they'll get worse repeatedly. So get used to that. And I think I would really take things too hard, and it was really, I would take an emotional toll on me. It's my personality to sort of get really, really excited about things and also to get really down when things are bad. And, it can take a toll. And so, I think as a 26-year-old going through that, I wasn't as prepared as I might be now to handle that kind of stuff. And so, I tell myself to chill out. It's going to be okay. And maybe it won't even be okay, but that's also okay.
Thank you for listening to LA Venture. If you enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. It makes a big difference in helping others find the podcast. For more information on TenOneTen Ventures, please visit TenOneTen.net.